In this video, we're going to show the most outstanding events and characters that shaped the 20th century. This century was distinguished as a period of change, changing political power from monarchies to society. We're going to see the change from autocracy to democracy and spread of communism. There is also scientific, medical, and technological progress. Transport is dramatically changed. New technology for communication, electricity, and medical services improve health of population. Globalization begins. Another big change is the balance of world power. Imperial European powers used to dominate, but with independence of colonies, main power changed to USA and USSR. Conflicts to show supremacy were continuous. To make it easier to understand, the body is divided in three.
We are going to start in 19 with the Boxer Rebellion in China to avoid Western influence, an anti-imperialism movement. At the end, Sun Yat-sen became the first president based on three principles: nationalism, democracy, and people's livelihood. In 1902, the Cuban independence happened. They declared themselves independent from Spain. Tomás Estrada Palma helped in the process with the support of USA. Then the Triple Entente was conformed by Great Britain, France, and Russia, who shared Germany as an enemy. Development started in 1910 with the Second Industrial Revolution. Came new ideas, globalization, electricity, and railroads. Albert Einstein contributed to this revolution with the new theories of relativity. In Mexico, end of Porfiriato was taking place in 1911, to end with Porfirio Diaz, who brought stability and growth but based in oppression and inequality. The Panama Canal was opened in 1914, use a spirit that connects Atlantic Ocean with the Pacific Ocean and is a key for international maritime trade. Suddenly, in 1914, World War I began with the assassination of Franz Ferdinand. It lasted 3 years and 7 million civilians died. At the end, national borders were redrawn and the League of Nations was formed. The Balfour Declaration was made in 1917. It established Palestine as a national home for Jews, causing conflicts between Arabs and Jews. Meanwhile, totalitarian regimes were being developed, like the one of Benito Mussolini in Italy, who was a fascist leader, that ended with the Fascist Revolution in 1919, to avoid militarized and violent government. Part of the British Empire was, in 1920, the British Raj in India. Indians suffered racism, worker exploitation, and lack of representation. Mahatma Gandhi created the non-violent disobedience, and Gandhi's first movement was in 1921 to achieve independence. Nehru also fought for independence, was the first governor of Pakistan after the partition, and declared religious tolerance. The USSR was formed in 1922 and communism started spreading. With the creation of credits, in 1921 was the Great Depression, which affected global economy. In Germany, Adolf Hitler became chancellor in 1933, forming the Nazi Party. The same year, Franklin Roosevelt made a New Deal to fight the Great Depression, creating new jobs.
With Hitler as a chancellor in 1836, first concentration camps were made. Joseph Mengele was responsible for the selection of victims to be killed, which ended in the Holocaust. 2 years later, Lázaro Cárdenas nationalized oil with the Mexican oil expropriation in 1838. The Spanish Civil War started. Francisco Franco, and also totalitarian leader, controlled Republicans to fight against nationalists. As no one was able to stop Hitler, World War II began in 1939. By 1941, Japanese empire was over Asia with Hirohito and his policy expansion. Japan conflicts with US started in 1941 with Pearl Harbor battle. After this, Winston Churchill declared war on Japan. And he also announced in 1944 Germany's unconditional surrender. Japan still resists to surrender till the atomic bomb destroyed Hiroshima and Nagasaki in 1945. When World War II ended, the United Nations was established in 1945 to maintain peace among nations. India finally gains independence in 1947. Communists gained control of China in 1949 with Mao Zedong as a leader. He promoted progress in arts and science during China a great power. But the Tibet was took, and Dalai Lama was a character that fought for Tibet's independence. Nations made efforts to avoid conflicts, and the peace treaty was signed in 1952 among 48 countries in San Francisco. The Economic European Republic was also established to reunite European countries economically and politically in order to secure lasting peace. But then, Cuban Missile Crisis appeared in 1962 after Fidel Castro overthrew the dictator and established a communist government supported by the USSR. Tensions between US and USSR began. Martin Luther King gave the famous I Have a Dream speech in 1963 demanding for racial justice and civil rights were signed, ending with discrimination.
Tension created between US and USSR ended in many treaties to avoid another big war. One of them was the Anti-Ballistic Treaties of 1972, signed by Harry Truman to ban the defenses against strategic ballistic missiles. Vietnam was divided by communism. US intervened, but Richard Nixon pulled troops out of Vietnam in 1973, meaning the end of the war. As a scientific advance in 1975 was created the European Space Agency established in Paris. Nuclear weapons still being a threat to security in 1977, the Nuclear Pact was signed by 15 countries, including US and USSR, with a further goal of achieving nuclear disarmament. 1978, Japan and China signed peace treaty to reaffirm friendly relationship and maintain peace in the Asia-Pacific region. In scientific aspects, the first baby tube test was born in 1978, an experiment by Robert Edwards, which took place in the United Kingdom. Later, the START I treaty was proclaimed to reduce nuclear arsenals in US and USSR. The efforts of the countries to use nuclear energy caused in 1987 the Chernobyl explosion that spread radiation through Russian evacuation was needed. Continuous conflict between communists and anti-communists were taking place in Germany till Gorbachev noticed that communism wasn't working, and this led to 1989 the fall of Berlin Wall in response to massive protests. At the same time, Beijing's Tiananmen Square took place in Beijing. Students, teachers, and workers demanding rights and end of the corruption. As response to the mass protests, Deng Xiaoping imposed the martial law. While in North Korea was ruling Kim Jong-il, he developed economy but people had no freedom. Another country ruled by terrorist Burma Till. In 1990, Suu Kyi Party won an election and even military refused to hand over power. And Suu Kyi kept fighting for liberty following Gandhi's ideology. Finally, in 1991, USSR is dissolved, with the independence of the Central Asian states, leading to the unification of Germany in 1980, having Roman Herzog as the first president elected by Germans, and the Cold War ended in 1992, when US President Herbert Walker Bush and Yeltsin declared it formally.
This shaped the 21st century. A great example of this is Mahatma Gandhi, who started his non-violent movements that actually are spreading and known internationally because Aung San Suu Kyi, who is a politician in Burma, is using them to reuse this ideology. But even though the non-violent movements are being used again, there are tensions between countries which were generated during this century. An example is North Korea and USA. Also, the Jews and Arab conflicts were created in the 20th century and still remain today. But thanks to the treaties made in the 20th century, we can say that peace is still maintained between many countries, avoiding use of lethal weapons. Not all of 20th century was negative. It also brought new technology in many scientific and communication camps, giving us a life as we have.